How you guys all doing today? I'm just a little bit nervous, and the reason I am, I think, is because a lot of the portraits of people that I've done over the past 5 years, I really want to do them justice and really want to convey how strongly I feel about them and their position in life and stuff. And I feel like there's a really weight on me, and to do them justice and to make sure their stories get conveyed and their portraits get conveyed, and sort of their message does also. I started a project called Underexposed about 5 years ago, and it has taken me all over California photographing the homeless in the various situations that they find themselves. And it's predominantly been, I've been focused on work in San Francisco, where I went to the grad school, and then also in Chico and Modesto, where I had a portrait studio for about 10 to 15 years. And I currently work in San Francisco as a commercial photographer, and I also teach at Chico State as a professor in their photography department. This is Spaceman. He goes by Spaceman. His real name is Andrew, and he's one of the guys whose stories I really want you guys to understand and know. And I think the reason I started Underexposed was I wasn't feeling very fulfilled with my current line of work, which was as a portrait photographer and a wedding photographer. And I did probably about 50 weddings a year for about 15 years. And for any of you who've ever shot weddings or done any portraits, it's quite a busy workload, and you don't do a whole lot of anything else. And because I was so roped into that lifestyle and working every weekend and working during the week, I wasn't doing a whole lot of photography for myself. And I left the studio one day and went down to 9th Street in Modesto near some taco trucks where a bunch of homeless hang out, and I just parked there and started watching them. And I realized that their faces were actually fascinating, and I watched their interaction, and then I just questioned, like, who are these guys and gals out here, and what are they doing, and what's their story? And I came from sort of a stereotype, or I gave them a stereotype that I felt that they were all abusing the system, and they're always asking for money, and they're always sort of a bother. And I sort of kept them, I think, like many other people do, in sort of the periphery of your vision when you walk around and you go places during your day. In the bigger cities like Seattle here and in San Francisco and other large cities, and also small cities now, you will see a lot of homeless around, and it turns out where we start to ignore them and just sort of walk past them, and they just sort of creep into the shadows, and they stay there, and we ignore them and don't even hear them anymore. And I became really desensitized and sort of numb to them also. And when I started talking to this gentleman named Leon, I found out that Leon had been homeless for 5 years, and he had been the owner of a shrimping boat in Louisiana and owned a restaurant there also. But because he had a fire on his shrimping boat that wasn't covered by insurance, he lost it, lost his restaurant, and then returned to his family in Modesto, where he wasn't able to live with them anymore, and then they'd been on the streets for 2 or 3 years, and said he just couldn't get back to what he was doing. And I looked at him and I was like, man, I didn't see him as a restaurant owner and a shrimp boat owner. I saw him as this homeless guy who'd probably ask me for money. And I sort of had an epiphany that day where I realized that all these people have stories, and they're not all meth freaks, and they're not all addicts, and they're not all people that are going to always ask us for money. And a lot of them just want to be seen as they were and who they are, and a lot of them do want to work. So I went to grad school after I shut my studio down in Modesto, and I realized that I wanted to pursue some more academic types of photography. I'd never had any kind of training at all, and it didn't stop me from becoming financially successful. I enjoyed and was very blessed to have a lot of really good clients, but I felt like academically there was something I could pursue. So I went to grad school at the Academy of Art University in San Francisco, and there I got not so much technical training, but I got pushed about my concepts and about my ideas. And they really stressed that at school, that you need to have some really sound, concrete ideas about why you're doing your photography and what you're doing. And because I was so challenged so much there, I'd never actually had to work with ideas or concepts. Shooting weddings and portraits of people, you're basically telling their story. So you go out and you light them, you make them look good, you get your money, and they're happy with their wedding, they're happy with their portraits, and you go home and we're all good. You've satisfied your client, and that's great. But I wasn't really saying anything for myself. And so when they asked me what I was passionate about, what I liked to do, what messages I wanted to share with people, I had no idea. Like, I didn't know anything I wanted to share with anybody. I just liked taking pretty pictures. And that was not enough. That wasn't enough for them. And the panel grilled me before my midpoint presentation of my thesis. They grilled me over and over about how I didn't have a concept, and I wasn't thoughtful enough about my work. And so I had to go in and start doing some research and pull out ideas of people who had inspired me or people who had come before and done some things that I really admired. And one was Louis Hine. And if you don't know who Louis Hine is, I didn't at the time. I'd never even heard of the guy. He was a photographer in the early 1900s, and he had a great way of talking about his photography and about his passion. And he did so in such an amazing way through his photos that he was able to almost single-handedly stop child labor at the time. And these are some of his images that he took while in these factories. And the guy was so passionate about his work that he would sneak into these factories dressed as a fire inspector. He'd dress as a Bible salesman. He'd dress as a postcard vendor. He'd dress as somebody that was sent from the manufacturers to check on the machines and photograph them. And while he was in there, he was photographing children working and missing limbs and some of the disasters and tragedies that happened in these mills, these cotton mills. After his work was published and it got out, there was an uproar, and those in the legislature and those that were able to make laws and stuff started stopping all this. And he actually died a very poor man, but his legacy was that he helped through his photography stop child labor. And as I researched him and saw some of the things he did, I became very inspired and thought, I want to have something like this, or I want to do something like this. I want to affect some change in society so that when I'm gone, I've actually done something to me that's valuable, and I've helped people feel something and make a change in society. What was a problem for Louis Hine was that he didn't have a whole lot of exposure. And if any of you remember, even 10 years ago, before the onslaught of Instagram and Flickr and Facebook and all these other great photo sharing sites, as photographers, we didn't have a whole lot of exposure. Like, unless you're a fine artist and got a gallery showing somewhere, or unless you worked in advertising, you could get stuff out in magazines, or a photojournalist and get stuff in newspapers. There are all those circulations of all those examples I just gave. They're not even very large. Today, as a photographer or as a content provider, as I tell my students in some of my classes, which we all are, because we all upload video and photo to some of these platforms daily, and some people hourly. You'll see that in Flickr there's 1 million photos uploaded daily, Instagram 70 million a day, Facebook 350 million a day, and Snapchat 350 million. So this is all the content that's going up daily. This is great. It's sort of a blessing and a curse, right? I'm sure those of you who have scrolled through some of the images or liked lots of images or follow any of these platforms, you'll understand a lot of garbage comes up. There's a lot of good stuff also. So the exposure, the fact there's such a great exposure is great, that we can get our stuff out there and our ideas and concepts out. It is sort of crummy though, because there's so much content now that if we have something really important to say, sometimes it's really difficult and our message gets lost in the masses of stuff. And I didn't want this to happen with my photography project with the Underexposed. I didn't want my homeless to get lost in the masses and massive amounts of content that are out there, just sort of like they get lost on the street. And I was hoping that I could find some way that my concept would survive. During grad school, I got to meet Allison Wright, and she has started this organization called Faces of Hope. She's a National Geographic photographer. She's amazing. And I got to sit at a roundtable discussion with her and about 5 other students, and she talked about her work and how her philosophy of photography drove her passions and her goals for photography, and how she wanted to treat people and how she wanted them to be perceived. And she said one thing that really stuck with me, besides all the other stuff in her great work. She said that people react much better to hope than they do hopelessness. And I sat there with that for a while, and I was like, she's right. That if we show photos constantly of hopelessness, where there's nothing to be done, that nothing we can do at all can change anything or affect anything at all, then what's the point, right? Like, why would we even put our energy into that? But if we show images where there's a slight glimmer of hope, and there might be something there that we can put our energy into and affect some change and change something, then that might be something we can get behind. So she started producing these images of, instead of what she called the cliche war-torn images of children that were emaciated, had flies, dirty faces, she started photographing more hopeful images. And she found that the response from people was amazing, that people could really get behind hopeful images because they thought there was something they could do. And because of that, instead of choosing to photograph my work in black and white and to use available light, which I was really, really thinking about changing over to, I kept my sort of commercial look going, how I'd normally light my subjects and my clients, and I kept that going with the homeless also. Now, I was sort of fighting against some perceptions that the public had initially, and I wanted to go against these. And if you look at this word cloud, I posted this on Facebook and got hundreds of responses. The largest ones, obviously, are the ones that people said were the most common. The smallest ones are ones that didn't come up very much at all. And you'll see cold, hungry, poor, sad, disorder, lonely, hopeless. Those are the ones that usually people associated the most with the homeless community. And I think that the homeless that I had met didn't actually hit this. They weren't defined by these words right here. They could have been defined by a bunch of other words also, but none of those hopeful words or happy words showed up on people's perceptions of who the homeless are. And it's possible that they just view them and see them and walk by them and don't understand who they are, and they give them these tags that they're hungry, cold, poor, and hopeless. And actually, there's a lot of other emotions these people have besides just these negative ones. So I wanted to show the exact flip side of the descriptions that people were giving them. I wanted to convey hope and not hopelessness. I wanted to use my light to affect mood and to change it, to warm it up and make them look a little more aesthetic. I wanted to change the public's perception. And I also wanted to allow these people to see themselves in a new light, both figuratively and literally. This is Kenneth, and I met him in a parking lot in Oroville. And Kenneth has been homeless about 15 years, and I don't know how long it's been since he's looked in a mirror or he's actually had a photograph of himself. And I came and gave Kenneth back his picture, which is what I normally do. My process with working with the homeless worked a little bit differently than probably a lot of people thought. And in fact, it created a little bit of an uproar on the internet, and they thought I was exploiting the homeless for my own gain. But I would come up and talk to these people on the street. I'd strike up a conversation and let them know my project is about photographing them in a way where I could promote some awareness for them. And also I wanted to photograph them so they could see themselves in a better light than they normally do. And I said, I'll do everything I can to make you look good. And they asked me why I'd do that. And I said, I think you look very interesting in aesthetic. I like your face. I like your story. And I'd just like to photograph you and give me a chance to see what I can do. And so as a commercial photographer, that's my job, right, is to make my clients look good. So I wasn't going to change my technique just because somebody was homeless or just because they had money or because they were of a certain station in life. It wasn't going to change how I approached my work. I wasn't going to stop using off-camera flash or lighting just because they didn't have a home. It didn't make sense to me. And so I gave Kenneth back his image, his picture. He was really emotional and cried. He said he'd never thought he never didn't think he'd look this good. And I could tell he was going to look that good when we started. But I got a signed modeling release from Kenneth, like I do with all my subjects, and I paid him $1 a minute, which is the general standard pay for all my subjects as well. I believe in paying all clients, all models, anybody who helps with the job or the set, and these guys would get paid as well. And then, of course, I brought back his image to him, and he really enjoyed it. This is Glenn. He's a great artist. He's living at the Hospitality House in Grass Valley. They brought me up there, heard about my work, and asked if the city council is getting ready to try to shut them down, and they're passing ordinances in the cities. They're called sit and lie ordinances. Chico's trying to pass one now where you can't sit or lie down in public, which is, to me, is totally targeted at the homeless community. Because if I sat down and looked scruffy and had a dog in a backpack and would go lay down in a park, and the police came up to me and said, "Hey, do you have a house? Do you have a home?" And I said, "Yeah," and they'd leave me alone. But if I didn't, I could get a ticket. It's just sort of a way their cities now are trying to find ways to remove the homeless and put them other places. Glenn has been a great artist for 10, 15 years and been selling these things, not able to sell enough yet to get on his feet again, but the man is supremely talented. And I used him as one of the images to help with the city council to see some of these people, to see them a little more like I see them. This is me working with Will down in San Francisco, and that sort of describes a little bit my process too for anybody who's sort of techie in here and likes to see how you light stuff and what kind of things you use for lighting. It's a little 12-inch by 12-inch softbox with a speed light on a monopod. It just triggered with a transmitter, and I've got the light really close to his face, and then composited the images of the people sort of staring and walking behind him. Unfortunately, Will died before I was able to go back and give him his image, and that really bummed me out. I was notified when the images were posted online. I was notified by a friend of his in Seattle and by a friend of his in Wisconsin, and some of the people I've met, I haven't been able to find them again, unfortunately, to go back and give them their image because they bounce around a little bit. This is me working again with a larger light source with Ernie in a park in Oroville. And this is working with a community of 70 homeless who are completely self-sustained and live off the grid in Marysville, California. They call themselves the Hollywood Trailer Park because it used to be called the Hollywood Trailer Park years ago, and now there's no trailers there, and they've got a bunch of makeshift houses and things like that. And they're completely self-sufficient. They don't really come into town a whole lot, and they just camp and live out there, and they're fine living off the grid. So the point of how I wanted to run my project was I would photograph the homeless, I'd pay them, I'd help them out a little bit. I'd also give them their photograph so they could have it. They in turn helped me and brought me to agencies and houses and shelters that actually served them also, who asked me to use their work or use my work to help promote the homeless also on their websites and their marketing and things. And so for places that didn't really have budgets, they were also using my work to help promote the people that were modeling for them, which turned out to be the homeless community. And it's sort of turned into a win-win for everybody. I just recently got this email last week, and I didn't realize how far the project would go and how many people it would affect. But the fact that it was gone on farther and affected more people than just the homeless that I photographed has already been something that's been very meaningful to me. And if all from this project, if the only thing that happened was that the homeless got really great, amazing pictures, that would be enough for me. I say embrace controversy when you're doing any kind of social projects for change, because if people are talking about it, you've made them feel something. I don't care if it's bad or if it's good. I honestly don't care either way. I found a guy's website that was totally dedicated to discrediting my entire project this morning when I was looking for bad examples of stuff, and I couldn't believe that the dude spent that much energy trying to find all the flaws in how I approach this. But it did mean, though, that he was passionate about it, and I made him feel something. Because public apathy is a photographer's worst fear. If nobody feels anything about your work, then you didn't inspire, you didn't make anybody feel anything, which is bad. These are some of my images I'm going to click through just really quick. so you guys can get an idea of some of the stuff I've been doing as I wrap up. Keep in mind, if you see them with dogs, that's great. The SPCA lady told me that if the homeless have dogs, that's all they want to do is stay all day with their owners. That's all they want to do. So I'll leave you with this quote from John Steinbeck, that man, unlike any other thing, organic or inorganic in the universe, grows beyond his work, walks up the stairs of his concepts, and emerges ahead of his accomplishments. And I think that if we go out there and we feel something about work, our own work, we help others feel it. We help promote change and affect change. And we try to leave some sort of legacy. I think that's sort of what, as photographers, we're all about. And that's one of our greatest callings. And I thank you very much.